Welcome to a presentation by Partnerships for Better Business Limited, bid management consultants who manage and deliver bids across the UK. This presentation is looking at the guidance for businesses preparing for reopening post-lockdown. Firstly, we need to look at the COVID timeline implemented by the UK government. As of the 1st of June, outdoor markets and car showrooms were allowed to open as long as they met the COVID-19 secure guidelines to protect shoppers and workers. On the 15th of June, non-essential retail, including clothes and shoe shops, toy shops, bookstores, furniture shops, photography studios and indoor markets will be allowed to open. Hairdressers, nail bars and beauty salons, as well as the hospitality sector, will unfortunately remain closed. The government had previously suggested 4th of July as a potential date for the above. However, this is subject to change as it is very much provisional. So we need to have a look at the government advice with regards to working safely during COVID-19 in shops and branches. As an employer, you have a legal responsibility to protect workers and others from risk to their health and safety. You need to consider the spread of COVID via person to person, person to surface, and I've also included point of sale, as this is the position at which customers will interface with staff and are likely to be in contact with surfaces. The guidance is clear that you must undertake a COVID-19 risk assessment, and this is not just a paper exercise. You should consult with your employees and health and safety representation. You need to consider contractors and agency workers, and you need to adhere to current legal regulations such as health and safety, employment law and equalities. The advice is very much still to work from home wherever possible. However, if you feel you're unable to do this, you must comply with social distancing guidelines. And you should also consider if activities need to continue. The key message is that no one should work in an unsafe work environment. In terms of managing risk, when planning for reopening, you unfortunately have to also consider a scenario that includes the possibility of returning to lockdown at any stage. So just looking at what the guidelines say about your workforce. As discussed earlier, a risk assessment is crucial, and sharing of those results is also very important. The government have produced a template called the Staying COVID-19 Secure in 2020, which you should display about your store or offices, and also you are encouraged to post on your websites. Again, to reiterate, everyone should work from home unless they are unable to. Nobody should go to work if your business is closed under current government regulations. With regards to social distancing, the advice to maintain 2 metre social distancing is still paramount, and this includes arriving and departing from work, at work in all areas, not just in the office and store, but also communal areas, and travelling between sites. In terms of getting to work, for the moment you're advised to avoid using public transport where possible. If you must use public transport, as of the 15th of June, it will be mandatory to wear a face covering. Employers might want to encourage walking or cycling to work, or to consider providing additional parking facilities. And you will also want to limit passengers in any vehicles. When entering and leaving work, you may wish to consider staggering an arrival and departure times, or increasing entry and exit points. You may want to look at introducing one-way flow systems, and you will also consider having hand washing facilities at entrances and exits. In terms of keypads and security devices, you might want to consider alternatives to these. When moving around buildings, you should discourage non-essential trips to other parts of the building, restrict access if considered necessary, look at introducing one-way flows. If you have a lift in your premises, you will also need to look at reducing the maximum occupancy and perhaps marking out areas where people can stand. You must also look at regulating the use of any high traffic areas. This is just an example of a couple of signs that you may want to look at putting up in your premises. The first is looking at restricting access, and the second is looking at one-way systems. Looking at workplaces and workstations, review layout to increase distances between these. You can do this by introducing floor tape or paint to highlight any distances. Where possible, try to work side by side instead of face to face, and if necessary, introduce physical barriers between people such as perspex screens. Use a consistent pairing system in terms of staff so that the same people are liaising with each other at all times. You need to minimize contacts at point of sale and consider rethinking any demos and promotions. These are just two examples of how you may look to reorganize your office. The top one there just shows floor plans and signage, which enables social distancing. And the bottom photo there just shows that how you can mark on desks. It might be as simple as that, just to encourage social distancing. We've already mentioned the possibility of perspex screens. You might want to consider those in areas like reception areas where there is going to be communication between staff and customers. And you might also want to consider things like floor vinyls to encourage people to maintain distance. In terms of business meetings, the advice is still to remote work wherever possible and use some of the virtual meeting tools as opposed to face-to-face meetings. You will need to maintain social distancing throughout and avoid transmission of objects through things like shared pens and pads of paper. You should try to implement hand sanitizer in all rooms, and if at all possible, hold meetings outside or in well-ventilated areas. You should also continue to use floor signage to encourage social distancing. You also need to consider common areas. Think about staggering break times for staff or using outdoor areas for breaks. If at all possible, create additional space within your premises. We've already looked at the perspex screens that you could install in reception areas, and also you should think about reconfiguring seating and tables. You should also think about areas such as lockers, kitchens and changing areas where people are likely to gather. These are just two examples of social distancing measures you could undertake. First one there is in a kitchen or canteen area, and the second picture there is lifts which have been marked out to encourage social distancing. The guidance is also clear that in the case of an accident, security or another incident, people do not have to stay 2 meters apart if it would be considered unsafe. You may therefore wish to review your incident and emergency procedures as well as doing a risk assessment. When reopening, you must also consider cleaning of the workplace. And once you are open, you also need to think about increasing the frequency of cleaning that takes place. Before reopening, assess and clean all parts of the site, check any ventilation systems, check water supply, and provide hand sanitizer. In terms of keeping the workplace clean, you need to look at work area and equipment and clean these between uses. Clean any frequently touched surfaces. Try and introduce a clean desk policy. Look at the removal of waste and try to do this at least daily. And follow the hygiene procedures. As discussed, frequently touched areas need to be cleansed regularly throughout the day. There is also specific guidance on the gov.uk website if you are cleaning after a known or suspected case of COVID-19. It is highly recommended that you refer to these. PPE and face coverings. Where you are already using PPE, the guidance is that that should continue. Workplaces should not encourage the precautionary use of extra PPE to protect against COVID-19 other than in clinical settings or where you are responding to a suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19. The guidance is also clear that unless you're in a situation where the risk of COVID-19 transmission is very high, your risk assessment should reflect the fact that the role of PPE in providing additional protection is extremely limited. However, if your risk assessment does show that PPE is required, then you must provide this PPE free of charge to workers who need it and ensure that they are aware of how to fit it properly. The evidence still suggests that wearing a face covering does not protect you, but it may protect others if you are infected but not but have not developed symptoms. Employers should support their workers in using face coverings safely if they choose to wear one. In terms of the correct use of face coverings, you should wash your hands before putting on and after removing. Avoid touching the face whilst wearing. You should change or wash the face covering daily. And social distancing is still paramount. Face coverings does not replace the social distancing. Staff should also be aware of how to make sure that PPE fits correctly. Just looking at shift patterns and working groups, you might want to look at fixing shifts so contact is maintained within the same people. You may also want to reduce deliveries to one person if at all possible, or to the same two people if necessary. You might want to look at removing direct contact where possible and minimising any non-essential travel. Where shared vehicles are in use, you need to clean these carefully between switchover. Staff wellbeing is, of course, very important. You need to provide clear and consistent messages. You need to engage with workers and any representatives and provide the appropriate training materials. You also need to monitor and understand the impacts and be aware of mental health amongst your staff. Just looking at managing your customers, visitors and contractors. In terms of managing contacts, you will need to define the maximum number of customers who can enter your store. You should also encourage hand washing and sanitisation use. You may want to look at avoiding product handling, and you may want to suspend or reduce interaction between customers and staff. You need to remind customers of their responsibility, both with regards to hygiene, but also in controlling any children and ensuring they maintain social distancing. You will also need to reduce congestion and contact between customers, and you will need to manage any queues. Consider using outside where at all possible. Supermarkets have, of course, implemented a lot of social distancing over the last few months, and you may look to them for some inspiration as to what you might be able to do as a business. In terms of managing contacts, you need to ensure any changes to entries, exit and queue management take into account reasonable adjustments for those who need them, including disabled shoppers. You must provide written or spoken communication of the latest guidelines to both workers and customers, and you should look to do this both inside and outside the store. In terms of guidance, you will want to look at things such as social distancing, the hygiene procedures. If necessary, you can request people remove face coverings in store, and you may choose to implement social distancing champions. In terms of encouraging good hygiene, training is obviously crucial. You may want to introduce information posters both inside and outside the stores. You may want to look at introducing sanitisation stations. You will want to review cleaning guidance, and that includes in areas such as toilets. You will want to increase cleaning frequency and also the collection frequency of your waste. And you will also need to look at what hand drying facilities are available. The guidance is very clear with regards to customer fitting rooms. These should be closed wherever possible. However, if you consider that it is not possible, rooms need to be cleaned between uses, and any clothes that have been tried on need to be delayed before they are returned to the shop floor. You should also consider suspending any fitting assistance. In terms of handling goods and other materials, you will want to limit that, both in terms of staff and customers. Again, look at providing hand washing and sanitisation facilities, and consider having separate pick-up and drop-off points. Also consider staggering collection times and providing a queuing system to ensure that people are not queuing without social distancing. You may also look at introducing a no-contact return procedure, and any items returned to store should not be reintroduced to the shop floor for 72 hours and should also be given a thorough clean. In terms of inbound and outbound goods, you should look at revising pick-up and drop-off procedures and minimising any unnecessary contact. You could also look at reducing the frequency and, where possible, use single workers. Also consider whether people should be able to stay in vehicles when making collections and deliveries. As well as adaptations within business premises, you may also see things starting to change in your city centres. Social distancing and keeping 2 metres apart is still crucial. You may see signage appearing within your city centre. You will also need to work with local authorities and business improvement districts to look at the best way of outdoor queuing, and there will be flexibility on outdoor seating areas. You may find additional cleansing and sanitisation stations set up in your city. There may also be one-way systems both on the highway for traffic and also for pedestrian areas. And you could see the closure of parking bays in order to widen footways. These are just a couple of examples of temporary solutions in towns and cities. And there you will see some of the markings encouraging social distancing. Of course, communication is vital, and there will be many ways in which you can get this message across to people visiting towns and cities. You should consider as a business trying to be as innovative as possible. COVID is an unusual situation and you need to respond to what the customer requires, but also consider the government guidelines. There are several useful links that you should look at. The first one is the government's COVID-19 recovery strategy overall document. And then there are the guidelines for the 8 different industries which can be found on the gov.uk website. The government's HSC advice site is also a very useful tool, particularly for the risk assessments and health and safety. And the Public Health England website also offers further information on COVID-19. As the guidance is regularly being updated, you may consider it useful to sign up for the alerts, and this is easily done by visiting the gov.uk website. Thank you for taking the time to review the presentation. Should you need any further information, please don't hesitate to contact Partnerships for Better Business Limited. Thank you.